when something crazy happens like COVID that disrupts all of your prearranged business plans and attempts to organize the world into whatever we think reality is, that really the quickest thing you can do is rip off that Band-Aid, ignore whatever our human brains would tell us not to leave the house and never go anywhere and never take any risks, right? So, ignore all of that and lean into the facts and the information you have right then to make a different plan and change the future to be what you want it to be. And last year was the first year where I was really able to take 6 or 7 years of those lessons, see COVID, see the impact, immediately react, change, reassess and adjust, and do that 2 or 3 times during the year. And it just resulted in fantastic results, across the board and everything I was involved in.
You mentioned a couple interesting points: pivoting and changing, moving fast, and creating a new reality or creating a new future. And this is something that you've been doing, and I would call practicing, to your point, 6 years. Was it easier for you to do it because you've had this practice? Is this innate? And why do some financial brand leaders struggle with this idea of accepting, embracing, and really moving towards change?
I think so. I don't think it's easy. I think it requires muscle memory and an internal belief or value system that says, I'm going to hit the override button on what my brain is telling me and how I'm feeling, to take a step back and reevaluate where I thought we were, or where I thought we were going versus reality. And I think, if you think about strategic planning or how you lead a team or any of those things, all of these things are designed to build coalescence or consensus around a theme or a concept and get group buy-in and then, go off and execute something. And the reality is that takes a huge amount of emotional energy to get people on the same page and going the same direction. And so when a crisis occurs, I think there's the usual stages of grief. You're angry, you're frustrated, you're, all those sort of things. But the reality is the faster you can move through those and accept each stage and move on to the next one is the faster you can adjust to the marketplace. And to me, the greatest companies are the ones that are able to do that consistently over time and really adapt and change quickly. But to adapt and change, we really have to disconnect from our fears at the end of the day and conquer those. And the fears are really, at the end of the day, mostly unfounded, right? Like they're just our reptilian brain ratcheted back to caveman era, where we're designed to react to certain stimulus in our environment that don't really actually exist anymore, right?
Well, there's that old analogy of fear being false evidence appearing real. And
right.
To your point, it is about hitting the reset button. And I think if I can encapsulate your thought, it all comes down to one word. It's awareness. It's awareness of where we've been, where we're at, and where we can go next, and accepting that loss. And you mentioned the stages of grief. It's accepting the loss of the old self to create the space and time to create the new self, the individual, the team, the organization, if you will, which is where I'd like to take the conversation, because you've got this new book out, Financial, and you write, every FinTech uses AI. Some gain competitive advantage, others solves old problems in new ways, all see better results than their non-AI competitors. They're creating the future. Yet most banks and credit unions aren't even thinking about AI. Why is that?
So I think it's easier to assume it's not going to happen to us, and that we're not, that there isn't any urgent and pressing threat, right, from it, than it is to accept, because the reality is you can react really hard and go say, we're going to do everything in AI. And that's an outsized reaction too, right? The whole credit union is not going to shift tomorrow to AI, but you can bet over the next 5, 10, 15 years, it's going to have repeated significant changes in that regard. And instead of, I think of, there's a great comic I saw that said, who had the biggest impact on digital transformation? The CTO, the chief experience officer, or COVID? Right?
And COVID was typically visualized as the wrecking ball coming into the boardroom. Yep.
Right. But the reality is that trend was so underway for so long that the credit unions that had made material progress on it have it's effortless, or it appears effortless as they ride that next transition in there. The ones that are really, put their head in their sands and said it's going to be all branch first, human to human piece, they're the ones that have the biggest lift in that struggle and have the biggest short-term pain in that equation. And I think AI is going to be similar. You're going to see layers of things peeled off that don't feel particularly disruptive. But if you do nothing for 10 years and you look up at that point, it's going to be hugely disruptive. And even, I'd go one step further. To me, I don't think it's all that important that credit unions be, investing hundreds of hours into AI right now. I do think if you look where the path is going to go, to be able to take advantage of AI, you're going to have to be on cloud, right? Yeah. To take advantage of that, you're going to have structured data and really put your analytics not just into solving day-to-day problems, but making it actionable and automated across everything, robotic process automation and those things. And so if the credit union isn't tackling cloud, robotic process automation, and analytics, and investing heavily in those three trends, when the trend does occur on AI, and it's going to occur faster than any other trend we've seen before, right? Because once it hits and creates a competitive advantage, it's unstoppable, right? I think, you look at Tesla right now as a perfect example, right? They have such a huge lead in AI that most of the other auto manufacturers have assumed that they have lost that battle, right? That it is just, it's not even the battery technology or the electric car piece of it or navigation or any of that. It's their long-term valuation, in my opinion, is driven entirely around their AI model and whatnot.
Well, you mentioned a story in the book, and hearing you talk through that, it's almost it makes me think of like what we view as the overnight success, because you mentioned a lot of financial brands who have been making investments, making progress. COVID hit and they've been able to really look like they've come out of, like, where did they come from? Why is this happening? Well, it's because they had been making the investments ahead of time, and this was an easy transition. And to your point, it's like 10 years looking back, and you shared a story which I felt like we're living parallel lives about the subject of learning and of math and the calculator. And right. You grew up hearing, you're going to need to do math by hand because you're not always going to have a calculator. Well, look at where we're at. Look at where our kids are. And so when we look at exploring the past to understand the present so we know where we need to go next in the future, why is it important? Because you wrote about these three timelines of human progress in the book. Why is it important to at least gain a sense of understanding about these timelines when it comes to AI?
Yeah, I think the key, if you look back at all the, you look at electricity, it took 50, 60 years for it to kind of become ubiquitous. Smartphones took 6 or 7 years, right? AI chatbots took 2 or 3, right? And so each one of these trends is happening faster, more disruptively, in that regard. A funny segue there. I was having this conversation with my wife where, she was trying to buy some pants for our kids the other day, and she goes, man, the PayPal integration isn't working. I can't pay for whatever it is. And 5 years ago, she'd be pissed off, right? And today she's like, the pace of all this technology and all this change is going so fast that it's not even reasonable for big brands to be testing every single component of their websites and payment integrations and whatever. She goes, I know it's not working today. I know it'll probably be working tomorrow. I'm not going to register a complaint. I'm just accepting that the pace is going faster and faster, and it'll fix itself.